The more we learn about the mitochondria, the more we understand how critical they are to our health. They also make components that are crucial for our living, including hormones like sex hormones or cortisol or melatonin that allows us to go to sleep.
But as I think about moving towards perimenopause and menopause and all the changes that will occur, I'm like, I need all those mitochondria in my brain.
We need to find things that give us pleasure, listening to the music, doing things that you feel like, oh, I feel more relaxed. Those are good for your mitochondria and good for your health.
The biology of our human body that just like knows what's right.
You're listening to Be Well by Kelly LeVeque. Dr. Daria Rosen, thank you so much for being here. I devoured your book, The Life Machines, and feel like I had a whole class on cellular biology, specifically all about mitochondria and my limited beliefs to what they actually do in our body. So thank you so much for taking the time to making the science accessible to all of us. I know you do amazing research and work on your own, but to be able to distill it down in such a digestible way, pun intended, for all of us it's been amazing. So thank you so much for writing this book.
You're welcome. It was great joy to do it together with my husband. It was a fantastic exercise in explaining complicated science so that it would be accessible to all. So that was the goal of this book writing.
Well, you definitely completed your goal and then some. So what I want this podcast to be for our audience is the 101 on mitochondria. So many of us believe that mitochondria, all they do is produce ATP or energy in our body. And we're told we need them to be healthy and robust, but they do so much more. So can you explain what a mitochondria is? And then we'll dive into all the different things the mitochondria is responsible for.
Okay, so mitochondria are small organelles, many of which are present in each of our cells. Organelle is like you have an organ like a liver. Organelle is a small organ that is within the cell. And the mitochondria, as you pointed out, are really important for our health. They are not only generating accessible energy for our body from the food we eat, but they do so much more. And if we maintain our mitochondria healthy, then our cells are healthy, and therefore the organs are healthy, and we are healthy. And that's a goal that we all have, to maintain our health.
So when we think about each cell, how many mitochondria are in a specific cell?
You know, this question is I often ask students or in a lecture, even faculty. And people think about 1 or 5 or 10, because that's what the drawings show us. But there are probably, most cells have thousands of mitochondria, or at least hundreds of mitochondria.
Wow.
Heart cells, for example, 40% of the weight of the heart cell is our mitochondria.
I mean, that makes sense. They never get a break, right? Need to keep pumping all day long.
Yes, and the heart is working so hard, so you really need lots of that.
So when you think about mitochondria specifically, a lot of us do just think about, the Krebs cycle or ATP production. Can you talk about what mitochondria really do? What are the 4 different things they're responsible for?
It's more than 4.
Oh, yeah.
It's more than 4. And that's the amazing thing. The more we learn about the mitochondria, the more we understand how critical they are to our health. So first, they are generating or participating in generation of most building blocks. So what are building blocks? Our cells, our body is made of 3 main molecules, maybe more, but 3 main proteins. And proteins are made of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. And many of them are, as they are being made, are made in the mitochondria. Our body is contains DNA. The information of how to make us is lying in that, in our genes, in the DNA. DNA is made of nucleotides, and the nucleotide synthesis is in part inside the mitochondria. And the same for lipids. Membranes are the means by which cells are compartmentalized and keeping out from in and in from out. Lipid quality is very important to make good membranes, and lipids are made of fatty acids. Those are the building block for that, and they are also regulated and made in part inside the mitochondria. So they made the building blocks. So that's essential. But then they also make components that are crucial for our living, including hormones like sex hormones or cortisol or melatonin that allows us to go to sleep. They make heme, which is a component in hemoglobin, which is what binds oxygen, for example, in our blood cells, but also in our muscles, in the myoglobin. So they are making other components that are so essential. They keep metals compartmentalized, metals and ions. That's very important. They send signals to other cells. They decide when a cell will die or live. They fight viruses. They fight bacteria. They even fight parasites that are sitting inside the cell. I can go on and on.
Well, I'd like to dive into some of these, and we'll start with like the one that everyone knows, and that's the production of energy. How do mitochondria produce energy for us to use and feel alive?
Yeah. So they don't produce energy. They convert energy that is locked in food into an energy that is accessible to the body, which is adenosine triphosphate or ATP. And the way they do it is they use two sources, carbohydrates or sugars and fat. Those are converted in the cell milieu that is outside the mitochondria. It's called cytosol. They are converted to acetyl-CoA, which is a small molecule that has only 2 carbons. Those get into the mitochondria, and then they get onto what we call conveyor belt. We try to use analogies to explain how things work. So the acetyl-CoA is moving on this conveyor belt, and as it converted to other compounds, it generates 2 important things, which are holding hydrogen, NADH and FADH2. And those are moving to another chain of events or electron transfer chain, at the end of which there is oxygen that accepts those electrons. And in the same time, it moves a rotor that moves inside our cells or rotate inside our mitochondria, hundreds of revolutions per second. And as it moves, as it rotates, this mechanical energy is converted to ATP. And ATP is then moving our life, making our a live creature.
So when you think about sort of this symphony of mitochondria all throughout our body, creating all of this energy, what are the ways that we can improve sort of the energy conversion? And what are the ways, like lifestyle factors, that really debilitate energy conversion from food?
Okay. So first of all, we give mitochondria good food. So we have to give food that is optimal for the mitochondria. So not processed food, but actually kind of primary food that you can get from plants and from animals. We also should give them the right micronutrients. Micronutrients are vitamins. Many of the vitamins that are important for our life are actually important for mitochondrial functions. We should not overload them with work that is not useful. We should not overload them with toxins like alcohol or burnt food or fat that is oxidized in a way that is toxic and so on. So we can do a lot to make our mitochondria function better by not overloading them with work that is not related to actual conversion of ATP, but actually put a lot of effort in detoxifying things.
So when you think about those micronutrients that not only do our bodies need, but our mitochondria really rely on, what are the ones that you recommend for supporting that conversion of energy?
Yeah. So if we are eating properly, which means that we have fruit and vegetables and fibers and good protein source, we probably get all the vitamins that we need, all the micronutrients that we need, all the metals that we need and ions that we need. We don't need any supplement. So I think that's the best way to make the mitochondrial function the best. Sometimes you do clinical studies, you do clinical tests, and you find that you're lacking certain vitamins, and it's very good to take extra. And oftentimes the physician will tell you about that. But in general, just good just good eating from good food, not burnt food, not over-processed food, and so on, is sufficient to provide you all you need. Vegetables, fruits, good source of proteins. Yeah. Fat is also important. It needs to be the right fat.
Most people think their heart health is fine because their cholesterol looks normal, but critical markers like lipoprotein A rarely get tested unless you specifically ask for them. And since it's February, National Heart Month, there is no better time to go deeper than one basic cholesterol line on your lab report. I'll share my own story. On paper, I have elevated cholesterol. That alone might sound scary. But when I ran a comprehensive panel through Function, I learned that my lipoprotein A is low, my C-reactive protein is low, and my cholesterol ratio is in the heart healthy range. That fuller picture gave me the peace of mind I was looking for and helped me understand that my risk is more nuanced than just high cholesterol. And that's why I like Function for myself and my clients. It doesn't tell you what to worry about. It shows you what's actually happening in your body. Instead of obsessing over one number, you get context across your heart health, inflammation, metabolism, hormones, stress, and more, so you can see how everything fits together. Function is designed by world-class physicians and trusted by hundreds of thousands of members. Health leaders like Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Andrew Huberman, and Dr. Jeremy London support it because once you understand your health, everything changes. You stop guessing, you stop being reactive, and you start making decisions based on real insights. To own your health, start with your heart. Function gives you access to 160 plus lab tests each year, including advanced markers for heart health, inflammation, stress, hormones, and toxins for $365 a year. Learn more or join by using my link. Visit www.functionhealth.com/BeWell by Kelly and use gift code BeWell25 for a $25 credit towards your membership. My new amino acid supplements come in flavorless and lemon water, and they're flying off the shelves, and here's why. I have meticulously sourced these vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. I am so proud of this being made the Be Well way, with maximum quality and minimum ingredients. My flavorless is simply those vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. Our lemon water contains minimal ingredients of only organic lemon powder, organic citric acid, and organic monk fruit. No natural flavors, no artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, no emulsifiers, no additives. This is simply that nutrition targeted for your goals. If you want to give my Be Well protein or aminos a try, or restock it if you're already loving it, take advantage of my gift for podcast listeners. Code podcast10 is going to get you $10 off just for being a listener. Write it down and shop with me after you listen.
Let's dive into that. I think when I think about mitochondrial health, always food first. I love protein, fat, fiber, and greens. Personally, I'm looking for all of those kind of as a balanced plate on my plate, as unprocessed as possible. It's what I recommend to my clients as their nutritionist, and it's just what I love. Like simple, balanced food. So I'm right there with you. You're preaching to the choir. When it comes to the just in case insurance, I do occasionally when I look at NutriVals, a multivitamin with methylated B vitamins, sort of like your typical electrolytes, like your magnesium, things like and potassium, things like that. But I love this focus on the inputs being clean and pure for the mitochondria. Let's talk a little bit about the two that they use for energy and fuel, which are carbohydrates and fats. And we'll start with carbohydrates. Is it detrimental for people to have excessive amounts of sugar, processed foods, or fast carbohydrates? And what's actually happening at the mitochondrial level?
I think in your question, you put your answer.
Am I spinning it for me a little bit? Well, no, I'm not trying to do that. No, truly, my husband would like to know that he can eat all the processed foods and it wouldn't affect him.
Processed food oftentimes contain a lot of sugar in it. It has also fat that is modified in a way that is actually not good for your body. So when you're consuming it, not only that you don't get all the ingredients that are required for your normal mitochondrial function, but you actually overburden them with detoxifying, removing those. So so it's not that carbohydrates are bad. We do need carbohydrate for our normal functioning. It's just that if they come in the form that nature made them, they are better. And if we start to look at refined sugar, refined grain, and so on, we lose a lot of the value in those, and we gain or we add things that are bad for us. So so simple food, freshly cooked, and so on, all those things are good for you. So carbohydrates are not your enemy. People are saying, it contains carbohydrates. But cake every day is not good for you. And we now all know that, or Coke, or sugary drinks and so on. So, and by the way, just on the side, giving alternative to sugar, so artificial sweetening, is not necessarily good either, because it fools your body to think that you do get sugar. And so that's also not optimal. So everything in moderation.
So is there any scientific literature or anything where you can see that this excess amount of sugar is detrimental to mitochondria? Like what's actually happening to the mitochondria when they're in contact with sugar all the time?
The all the time is a very important point that you just made, but maybe let me start from a different place. There are people that are claiming that sugar is a toxin, that white sugar is the reasons why currently health challenges for so many people. I think that that's an extreme, but I think that in refined sugar is really not good. What happens when when your level of sugar in the blood is always high, it makes your cells in the pancreas, which is a small organelle, releasing insulin. And when the insulin is released, it tells muscle cells especially, but also of cells in the body, there is glucose or sugar outside, get it into the cell. But if you do it a lot, eventually you desensitize to the signal. So even though sugar is high, the response to insulin is poor. So it's really important to keep it fresh so that you'll be sensitive every time you have sugar in your blood. And I think that one of the problems with sugary food and consuming it all the time is that you lose that sensitivity to insulin, which is a form of that leads to diabetes. But also sugar, if it's just sugar, it's not providing you with all the other important nutrients that you need for your body.
This science just opens my eyes to even more of the reasons why we need to get on board with, simple eating the way my grandma used to serve food at a table, like a protein, healthy veggies. Like if you're having a starch, it's like it's a whole food. But when you think about all the different things that mitochondria do, we touched on carbohydrates. So I'd like to touch on fat as a fuel, because I look at the last 12 years of doing this, and there were times when the ketogenic diet was very popular, or there were times when becoming metabolically flexible was really popular, like where someone would carb cycle. They wouldn't have carbs every single day, or they would cycle them around a workout when their insulin sensitivity was high and their muscles were hungry for sugar. So I'd be curious if you could explain, when you think about mitochondria and the two fuel sources, is one better than the other? Is it good to be metabolically flexible and be able to burn sugar and fat? And yeah, like what does it look like for the mitochondria when they're burning each of those fuel sources? Like what's given off? What happens? Like, yeah, break it down.
So let's start with the beginning of your question that relates to changes in fashion or fate.
Yeah.
It's very natural for us to hope to have a simple instruction. You do this and you guarantee to get that. And don't we all want that? But life is more complex. And so we have several themes in the body, and one of the things is both. It's not either or. And the other one is the Goldilocks principle, which is not too much and not too little. And I think those two guides, there are several other guides that keep coming in the book that relates to what do we learn. Let's then go to what is metabolic flexibility. So it literally means the ability of the mitochondria to switch from using fat as a source to make ATP to carbohydrate or glucose as a source to make ATP. This flexibility is natural. In 24 hours during the day, we use mainly glucose or sugar carbohydrate source for generating ATP. And at night, we switch to fat. It's very important not to confuse the body about that, because that's mess up a lot of things, including sleep cycle and cleaning, accumulation of waste in the body and so on. So that's why it's a very good idea to eat during the day and then at night not to eat, not to confuse your mitochondria, because if you are eating at night, you turn on again glucose metabolism instead of fat metabolism. So flexibility is very important. When we learned about flexibility, there was a hope that maybe we can then drive it further to flexibility beyond the 24 hours. So maybe if we eat one day just carbohydrate and one day or just fat, that will be optimal. The jury is still out on that. But I would say in general, it's not the natural way that we were made, So ages ago, people continued to consume a mix of sources for energy, and that's probably the right way to continue.
When you just think about the basics of maybe like 50 or 60 years ago, you're like, okay, you had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Dinner was before it got dark. It wasn't at like late night eating and snacking and processed sugary desserts like right before bed. And your body was able to digest the food you were eating, whether it contained carbohydrates or not, and preferably in whole food forms that your body was familiar with and could metabolize. And then it would make sense that you wouldn't have to be doing that work when you sleep, but that your mitochondria were fueled the entire time you were sleeping from the fat that had accumulated on your body or that was stored there. And that when you woke up, you would have breakfast, you'd break your fast and do it again. I think we're so confused, though, with all the blue light and the late night eating and the intermittent fasting that has people not eating till 2 or 3 in the afternoon or having one meal a day. I think, we're trying to outsmart the biology of our human body that just like knows what's right.
We do that because we really all kind of aim to eventually have healthy life. Maybe not immortality, but just, having good health span. So it's natural that we are trying to do all sorts of experiments. But the problem with that is that oftentimes we get instructions. As I said earlier, if you do that, that will guarantee. And in reality, any extreme is not recommended, hence a Goldilocks. And also the other thing is that we need to listen to our bodies. So if we create a change and it doesn't make us feel good, for example, we exercise a lot and then we find ourselves getting a lot of colds when somebody else has cold next to us. And maybe we should think about what's going on, whether what we do is too much. So listen to our bodies is really important. But also we tend then, when we start on a regimen, we give ourselves hard time if we don't stick to it. That's also bad for your mitochondria, because that is stress, and stress is bad for mitochondria. So I think one of the key things that we were trying to say is that there are simple lifestyle things that we could do to make our mitochondria healthier, and therefore our cell healthier, our body healthier, and not being hard on ourselves, and having proper sleep, and not being too stressed, and not being exposed to toxins, both emotional toxins, but also literal toxins, and so on. Exercise, doing, being socially active, and having, love in your life, and so on. All those things are good for you. They're good for you because they're actually good for mitochondria, and there are now experiments that show that, which is really fascinating. You can show that having a good conversation before you go to sleep actually make your mitochondria better in the morning.
How did they prove that? How did they prove that?
So here is a study. The study was conducted years ago, where samples were taken from people who were taking care of a member of the family that was ill for a long time. And it's usually were women. So they took the blood sample from them, and then they measured a variety of stress hormone and so on. Then years later, Martin Picard was interested in looking at their mitochondria, because he started to be interested in mitochondria, and he looked at the evidence of mitochondrial damage in the blood. And he found that actually women that were stressed had higher evidence for mitochondrial damage in the blood. But in that study, they also interviewed the women, because they took samples over time. They asked them, did you have an evening last night? Did you feel last night more relaxed? You had something joyful in your life, and so on. And then they checked the blood samples of these women, and there was evidence that they had less damage to the mitochondria. And so we know now people who are in constant stress, are taking care of ill member, they are told again and again by the healthcare provider, you need to take care of yourself, because you will not be good to take care of whoever you need to. And people feel, I can't do it right now, I have to take care of that. But really taking care of ourselves is essential so that we'll be at our best.
When your mitochondria work better, everything works better. And as I get older, I'm really focused on supporting my energy and longevity from the inside out. And that's why I've been loving the MitoPure gummies from Timeline. They are longevity gummies designed to support cellular energy, so you feel stronger and more vibrant as you age. They're powered by MitoPure, the only clinically proven form of urolithin A shown in human studies to help renew mitochondrial function, a key driver of healthy aging. For me, these gummies have become a true foundation in my supplement routine. I keep them next to my coffee, and I take 2 every morning. It's one of the few daily habits I actually stick to because it's delicious, simple, and doable. But it's working at a much deeper level. It's supporting my muscles, my energy, and how I'm going to feel 10, 20, and even 30 years from now. If longevity feels overwhelming, this is a great place to start. It can start with that one simple daily habit that supports your cells. And you can support your cells and how you age with MitoPure gummies from Timeline. Visit timeline.com/Kelly and save up to 39% off your MitoPure gummies. That's timeline.com/Kelly. I am so excited to share with you guys an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness. Meet Fatty 15, powered by C15, the world's first essential fatty acid discovered in over 90 years. Scientists are calling it the longevity nutrient, and for good reason. Fatty 15 was founded by Dr. Stephanie Van Watson, who uncovered C15 while studying aging dolphins. Her research revealed something incredible. C15 works by strengthening our cells, improving our mitochondrial function, and protecting us against damaging free radicals. The result? Better long-term metabolic, liver, and heart health. Fatty 15 is powered by pure vegan-friendly form of C15 and an odd-chain saturated fatty acid that's more stable than most polyunsaturated fats. That means it resists oxidation, staying potent in the bottle and in your body. It turns out that many of us are deficient in C15, which results in weaker cells. that make less energy and quit working earlier than they should. All of that makes us age faster, sleep poorly, and feel sluggish. But by replenishing our cells with that essential C15 nutrient, the only ingredient in Fatty 15 effectively repairs our cells and restores our long-term health. Plus, it comes with a gorgeous reusable glass jar and refill capsules shipped quarterly right to your door. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish your C15 levels and restore your long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Kelly15 and using the code Kelly15 at checkout.
So for someone leading a sort of fast-paced life, or they feel like, yeah, I have a good amount of stress in my life, but I do focus on sleep, or I do focus on nutrition. What stress alleviating lifestyle recommendations do you have for people to improve their mitochondria?
Some of them you hear from, older people in your family that give you this, life advice and so on. So for example, it's very important that before you go to sleep, you don't have a stressful conversation. You don't watch the news right now, just before you fall asleep. You try to focus on positive things. I used to work until I'll go to sleep. So I would work. Then I would feel, okay, my brain is dead, and I'll go to sleep. And then I'll find myself falling asleep. And then in a few minutes, I will wake up and I will still thinking about work. So now, for a long time, actually, I had the habit of stopping to work way before that, and then read a novel or do something else that is relaxing. The other thing is that if you spend time outside, I think we shouldn't underestimate the benefit of looking afar, looking at the horizon, being in a green, breathing fresh air, what the Japanese call forest bathing, going on a hike, having a fun evening with friends, laughing. All those things are good for mitochondria. Being surrounded by love, but really social interaction. But also there are many other things that we could do to reduce stress. Exercise, if you love it. I mean, I don't. But I recognize the importance of that. So we just have one car and I walk everywhere, and I love hiking. So I do hiking. And I do go to the gym because I know that I have to build my muscle too. But it's not my love. It's not. So I'm trying to be regimented about it. I think we need to find things that give us pleasure, listening to the music, doing things that you feel like, oh, I feel more relaxed. Those are good for your mitochondria and good for your health.
I 100% agree. I feel like, well, I have 3 little boys. You probably don't know that. 7, 5, and 2.5. And so I come home to a loud, rowdy house full of craziness and love. But I will say, they always want to be outside. So I'm outside all the time when I'm around them. And I'm so grateful for that. And being in Southern California, I'm willing to pay the increase in taxes and have all the crazy things we have here in California for our horizon and our beaches.
Outdoors.
Yeah, the outdoors, the hiking, all of it. It's really important. It's part of, we live in a smaller tract home to live in where we live, because that is such an important part for my husband and I and our family.
And we shouldn't forget that we just came from a long period of COVID, where we were confined to our homes, and people that have a backyard could handle it better than those that lived in apartment buildings. And the long-term impact of that, not to mention the other stress and the virus and so on, all that increasing anxiety, inability to be socially active. Yeah, so those small things where it feels like, oh, we're wasting our time. We're supposed to be productive. We're supposed to do more.
I get caught in that.
Work is good too.
Yeah.
I mean, I love my work. I'm sure you do too.
I do.
It gives me great pleasure, really. But it also gives me great pleasure to come home and, I walk in a beautiful neighborhood, and on my way home, I love it.
Yes.
Being aware of your environment and so on, all these things,
makes a big difference.
sleep is very important for our mitochondria and therefore for our health, because sleep is a period in which a lot of the processes that clean up all the accumulation of what we call soot or rust in our machine occurs. These are processes in which bad parts in the cell and also inside the mitochondria are segregated away from the functional part. And then they are removed. And the amazing thing that they are removed and recycled. So their elements are then going back to use of new components. So, the body is a fantastic recycling machine. For example, we consume something like 250 grams of proteins a day, but actually the recommendation of how much you need to eat is only 75 grams, or 50 grams or something like that. So where is the rest of it coming from? It's come from recycled proteins that started to be broken, and then they go to a recycling machine, separate to their component, and then it can be used again. That occurs mainly at night.
When you mention it in the book, you have mitophagy, and that is programmed cell death of mitochondria, correct? Just like autophagy, or is that the recycling specifically?
Yeah. So mitophagy is a process literally it means eating mitochondria, the mitochondria. There is a machinery that takes the broken parts of the mitochondria or a small part of the mitochondria, engulf it and digest it to its component. That's mitophagy. There is another process that is called autophagy, which is self-eating. And that is a process by which other parts of the cells that are dysfunctional are being segregated and being dismantled to its elements. Autophagy is, for example, very important to prevent aggregation of proteins, like what happens in the brain during in Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. So this process of getting rid of accumulated broken parts is really important. So if we use oftentimes the analogy, we use lots of analogies in the book because I discovered that that's a way I can explain better to my husband things. Mm-hmm. So I think being an intelligent man, he probably represent the readers as well. So if you think about a factory, during the day, a factory is full of workers. They work fast, and some packages and reagents and so on are scattered around because they are busy doing something. Now at night, it's when the cleaning crews comes in and clean everything and segregate good from bad and make sure that in the morning the factory is again ready for operation. Now imagine if you do it while people are working, and that's actually what happens in factories that are operating 24 hours a day. It's a problem. It's not done well. At night is the time that we really need to let the body focus on the repair, the cleaning, and not activate it to do things that it's not supposed to do. But other things happen at night. And really, the amount of research that is being made right now is so exciting. So, for example, you know that the brain is a closed environment, which is good. It protects the brain from all sorts of chemicals that comes to it, from bacteria and viruses and so on. But that means that things that go in needs to find a way to go out. Otherwise, you keep accumulating in the brain. And of course, the brain has lots of mitochondria, and they make rust and soot as well. And it's important that those will be removed. But if things don't go out very readily, it's a problem. In the body, all our tissues are constantly having motility in them, not only because we move, but because the blood vessels in us move. So they kind of constantly shake things and things can go out. In the brain, there is no movement. There is almost no movement. But what research found recently is that the electrical activities that occurs during sleep, which is rhythmic, creating a move in the liquid in the brain. And that's a way that soot and rust leaves the brain So if you don't sleep and you don't dream, you accumulate gunk in your brain. Another good motivation to get your 7 or 8 hours sleep, and not to suddenly tell the body, oh, it's time for you to metabolize sugar. You don't have time to do that. So sleep is very important, but sleep is important also because it affects your mood, and that's important. It lowers your cortisol and so on. Sleep is important because it's a time in which you are reducing your stress level and on and on. So sleep.
Yeah, it's no one wants sleep more than a mom with little toddlers or babies. I can tell you that. You're like, how can I get the most consistent sleep? You just give up and you end up going to bed exactly when they do to guarantee you get the hours you need, even if they're early risers. So when you talk about that rhythmic sort of like movement of the brain during the sleep stages, is that the same as glymphatic cleansing or the glymphatic cleaning of the brain?
Yes, exactly. Oh, good for you.
Okay.
So no, because this is also relatively new discovery. So it wasn't clear whether the brain has lymphatic system, and whether the lymphatic system in the brain is associated with the lymphatic system in the body, which is really important because one of the goals of the lymph is actually the goals of the lymph system is to bring things eventually to the liver, which is the organ that is the best in activating the mitochondria, get rid of dirt, metabolize toxins and so on, but also metabolize carbohydrates and fat. So research now maybe a dozen years ago showed that there is a lymph system in the brain that is called glymphatic system rather than lymphatic, and bless them for changing a name. and it's serving the same purpose. But as I explained, the lymphatic system is moving forward not because there are muscles in the lymph system, but because there are muscle around it. So we all know this experience when we fly. We get off a plane and we notice that our legs are swollen. Hopefully it doesn't happen anymore, that people know to move their legs and to try to walk a bit in the airplane. The reason is that the muscles don't move, and so they do not push the lymph up back to the body. In the brain, as we said, there are no muscles, so the movement in the glymphatic system is really important. That's what you get when you dream, which is it's 2 years that it was discovered, and it was shown in animals. One would think that it will happen. It happens in human, but at the moment, the evidence in human are not the same and are not as strong.
Wow. It's so fascinating. I mean, a case to move your brain through sleep and dream, and a case to move your body. So moving on to that, like why would working out be beneficial to mitochondria and mitochondrial health?
So let's start with exercise and what it does to your muscle. So when you exercise, if you do strength exercising, so against weight, you are growing your muscle bigger. Muscles contain a lot of mitochondria, so that means that you increase the amount of mitochondria in your body. So we'll come back to that in a second. The second thing is that when you do endurance exercise, you actually activate a process that renews broken mitochondria and increase the number of mitochondria in your muscles that are functional. So the end results of both endurance and resistant exercise is that you have bigger muscle with more mitochondria that are functional. Why is it important? Because one of the biggest discovery of, again, the last dozen years is that mitochondria are not homebodies. We always thought them of staying in their own place in the cell. In fact, if you look at the drawing of a cell, you see a single mitochondria sitting somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Just one.
First of all, they can actually get out of one cell and go to another cell, which is like mind-blowing. They can send little treats to other cells. these little traits being short peptides that actually mitochondria are unique in that they have their own DNA. And in the DNA, they are encoding only 13 proteins and some other components of the cells. The rest of it is, people thought was doing nothing, but actually we now know that they make short peptides, and these peptides can go out and, for example, benefit the brain, reduce damage to the brain, and perhaps reduce chances of Alzheimer's disease. There are peptides that affect fat cells, and so on and so forth. So if you have good muscle and good mitochondria in your muscle, you have good mitochondria everywhere in the body, and you have also good signalings for everywhere in the body. So knowing that now should be a better motivator to go to the gym, which has been mine. I have to say, when I learned about humanin and MOTS-C, those short peptides, I said, okay, I get it. And one of the things that we're trying to do in our book is the first part, we explain what the mitochondria is doing for us, to motivate us to the second part, which is what we can do for them, because it's worth it. It's worth it. Well, small investments are impactful.
It's so impactful. I think that was the biggest aha from your entire book, was that the mitochondria can move. Because for me, when I think about building lean muscle mass, I love blood sugar. That's what I've built my whole career on, is understanding and supporting people to balance their blood sugar through food, through whole foods. And I think about insulin sensitivity and muscles all the time, because I think about, okay, if your body is ingesting a bolus of carbohydrates and your blood sugar goes up and insulin's released, and we're going to put that sugar in, put it away is what I say. If you have bigger, stronger, more insulin sensitive muscles, then you have the ability to do that. And I always knew that that was the lever I could pull to increase insulin sensitivity in my clients, was to motivate them to work out, because I would look at the building of lean muscle mass on, their skeleton body, whether it's like the big muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, and think to myself, like, okay, just like imagine just adding a layer that could suck up sugar for you, and then it wouldn't elevate blood sugar, wouldn't lead to prediabetes, diabetes, all the other chronic lifestyle diseases that come on the heels of that. But the minute I learned in your book that these mitochondria could not only just be built, but even optimized by different types of working out, I'm like, that's it. We're strength training, we're aerobic training, but we're doing it really primarily, I think about, as I'm moving towards, I'm cycling right now, but as I think about moving towards perimenopause and menopause and all the changes that will occur, I'm like, I need all those mitochondria in my brain. I want them in all my organs, like to think that, like, wow, like you could actually work hard enough to increase energy, and not even just the energy, you talk about all the other things, like the building of the parts that your cells and mitochondria need, the taking care of, like, ensuring a healthy cell with these mitochondria. It's just so powerful to me that you've been able to distill this down and share it, because it is truly, like, it is the takeaway. Like, we are in control, and it's not just looking strong. My husband always says the guys go to the gym and it's like they're not in shape, they just look big with huge muscles, and I'm like, actually now I can tell you that, like, those muscles are doing something for every other organ in their body, and that's so powerful.
It's true. And I would say that when, I'm sure you notice it when you talk to people about insulin sensitivity, you say you're protecting your brain, and now you get their attention, because if you ask yourself what is the things that you worry the most, is to lose your brain capacity, right? This is such a big thing. And now and also, what you do in motivating other people is so important. You have to find what is the key things for them, and so that's why we give a variety of things. And we also always say you don't need to do all of the things right. You have to do some of the things right a lot of the time.
There are fringe things I want to talk about that you just mentioned too. You mentioned MOTS-C. I know you mentioned urolithin A in your book as well. So, I primarily eat whole foods, and I like to supplement with, like, a functional multivitamin to give me methylated B vitamins, like I said, the minerals. But when it comes to this, like, new age of peptides, I have access and have taken MOTS-C before as an injectable peptide. I love Timeline with urolithin A. I've known about that company for 3 or 4 years and worked with them in the past. I think that it's phenomenal. Can you talk about like some of the things coming and how you feel about them specifically, like access to urolithin A, access to MOTS-C? Like, is this a good thing or a bad thing?
So everything that I'm saying, of course, I'm not a physician, okay? So everything I say is based on science, not on medical advice. I think learning about these small peptides is really amazing, and there is a lot of interest in, can we have shortcuts? Instead of exercise to the gym, can we get an injection?
Yeah.
Everything. So the problem with that is that it's just one element, and there are many elements that we still don't know that they are contributing. And also many of the elements that we get, if we get them in isolation versus as a whole gamut of things occurring at the same time, are not the same, giving the same benefit. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I hear, actually the first drugs that I developed was a peptide that was injectable. And people say, why can't I take it orally? And many people have talked to me about the new peptides, and they take it, they have it in their shake. I said, that's great, but you know that the more it gets to the stomach, it becomes individual amino acids.
You're just being digested, yeah.
So the only way is to get injections. So the issue about the injection, of course, is that if it's different enough from the one that you make, and our mitochondrial DNA are not exactly the same. So depending on your ancestry, you may have different DNA in your mitochondria than mine or somebody else's. Then if the amino acids are a bit different, it may be recognized as foreign. And then it will your body starts to fight it and actually damage it. And by giving something that is similar to self, but not self, you can start to then develop antibodies against the component that is your own.
Autoimmunity.
Like autoimmunity. So imagine that your MOTS-C has 2 amino acids that are different from mine, but the one that you get is mine. That could be equally beneficial for you. But if your body starts to recognize that it's mine, not yours, and then it says, oh, I don't like yours either, you lose the benefit of MOTS-C, just as an example. I want to point out there is no evidence that injecting of those peptides causes autoimmunity at the moment, but there are no clinical studies that actually look systematically at what's the benefit of providing this externally and what is a negative outcome. So the jury is still out on that.
So, yeah, buyer beware. The risk is your own.
Buyer beware. And we have a short segment that talks about think like a scientist. We constantly get advice from the media. It's really attractive, or even charismatic scientist or physician, oftentimes charismatic.
Yeah.
And oftentimes somebody that sounds like authority. So how can you, as in the audience of those comments, can judge what are the tools? And we said think like a scientist, which is actually not complicated. So who is this person? What is the opinion based on? Is it clinical studies? If the clinical study, are they blinded? In other words, the people who were getting the treatment and the people that judge whether the treatment are beneficial were not aware whether that group was treated or not treated. And then is a person that got the treatment like me. So if a study was done in young people and you're in your 60s, is it relevant to me? And then how big was the study and so on. So I think being cautious is good. I can also understand our constant thrive to do better for our body and try things. So the last thing is, how does it make you feel? And I think that we need, as I said, with exercise, for example, it's really important. There is everything that we do is that, do we feel better after we do that, or do we start to think that something is not working well? So,
can you explain how someone might be able, or how someone would produce MOTS-C from their own mitochondria, or what it's like, those little small treats, as you call them? Like, how long does it take if you're working out to get the production of them, and then where do they go in the body and what do they do?
Yeah, I'm not the expert in that. Actually, the expert in it is in your backyard. He's at USC. His name is Hassi Cohen.
Okay.
And everything that you want to know about peptides that are made by mitochondria, he's your man.
Okay.
And
Well, I'm going to ping you after this for an introduction, and we'll get him on the podcast next.
He's wonderful. Yeah,
Okay.
you should.
I
You
will.
should. And so he's at USC. He's a dean. I don't remember what department, but he's an MD, PhD, and he actually knows what he's talking about. Not like me on that.
Okay.
But the thing is that there are studies that looked at the level of those compounds in people after certain practices, and he will be able to tell you the exact experiments. But there are other things. So, for example, there is a study in people over 100 years. I think it was a Japanese group of super centenarian or ultra centenarian or hyper centenarian. And they sequence the peptides that they have in their blood, one of the peptides that mitochondria makes. And they found that they have a unique sequence in that peptide. So maybe that's a super peptide to take. Not my MOTS-C, but their MOTS-C or whatever it is. So I also want to point out that usually short peptides can be made so that they will not trigger immune response. And I know that Hassi, together with Nir Barzilai from New York, are working on trying to make them into a drug. And I'm very hopeful. I think that those could have a potential benefit that is very important, not only for healthy aging, but importantly for people who have chronic diseases. So I'm very optimistic about this approach.
When you think about chronic lifestyle diseases, I think a lot of people will look at each one separately. They'll go to their doctor and they'll be like, you have heart disease, or you have type 2 diabetes, or metabolic syndrome, or autoimmunity, or, there are just like a lot of things that people are dealing with nowadays. How do you look at it? Do you look at it all down to the mitochondrial level? And if we got the mitochondria healthy, we probably wouldn't deal with these? Or do you still feel like there's a place to segregate and separate the human body into the different disease states or areas that they should be treated?
So as we just discussed, the fact that the mitochondria are not home bodies and they can influence other organs and they can actually go to help other organs. So that by itself is mind-boggling. By the way, we don't know that actually mitochondria from the muscle get to the brain. We haven't seen experiments like that, but we know that mitochondria can be transferred from one cell to the other. So if you think about chronic diseases, are they caused by dysfunctional mitochondria? Are all diseases caused by dysfunctional mitochondria? I would say this is completely incorrect. What we do find that all or many of the mitochondria that we look, many of the diseases we look at, I would maybe virtue say almost all diseases. If you look at the organ that is affected or other organs, you find that the mitochondria are not functionally optimally or even are really dysfunctional. The problem with dysfunctional mitochondria, which we didn't have a chance to talk about it, is that they are not only not doing their job, they're actually causing damage because dysfunctional mitochondria make more oxidative stress, reactive oxidative species. They make more rust, more soot. They can kill cells. And so not having functional mitochondria is bad by itself. But importantly, if common disease have dysfunctional mitochondria at the bottom of it, or as a commonality, or as a consequence of the disease, the ability of the cell to repair itself goes down. And if it goes down, the disease is becoming worse and worse and worse. An example. Many neurodegenerative diseases are associated with accumulation of proteins that are gunking our brain.
Mm-hmm. Like amyloid plaques and tau.
For example, or synuclein accumulation in Parkinson's and so on. Mm-hmm. If the mitochondria are functioning properly, then they can trigger this process of autophagy, of removing the damaged proteins from the cells, clean it up, and repair whatever damage occurs, and generate the building blocks that are required for neurotransmission and all the other functions that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a chronic disease and you're improving your mitochondrial function, the mitochondria can help the cell heal itself and therefore the organ healing itself and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So supporting mitochondrial health is not necessarily a cure, but has a great benefit in a chronic disease. And that's bring me to the end of your question, which relates to how medicine is practiced at the moment, where you go to a cardiologist when you have a heart disease and you go to the nephrologist when you have kidney problems. Should we also consider the fact that your any part of your body can be part of your chronic disease, and anything that you do to improve mitochondria in any tissue will be beneficial? I would argue strongly yes.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was writing the book, and since I was bubbling with all the things that I learned about, I would attack my neighbors, physicians, scientists, and clinicians in our medical school. And again, and give talks there. And again, I would be surprised how many of them are just not aware of what the mitochondria do and how critical they are, and how small lifestyle changes can really be beneficial, and how they are important to incorporate. I mean, you're talking about being a mother. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, when you gave birth, you were hospitalized for a month, then for a week, and now you're thrown out of the hospital after 2 hours. I know that because I had 40 kids of my own. And sometimes you think, come on, give me a break.
Yeah.
I would like to have another night's sleep before I go home to.
Yeah.
But the reason for that, and also after bypass surgery, immediately patients are being told to start to walk around and not to lie down. I think that we start to know the benefit of treating the whole body, not the organ. But still, I think that most physicians are unaware of the importance of everything else. And maybe the way to practice medicine in the future would be not to go to the eye doctor when you have eye problem, but actually to go to physicians that understand how the whole body works and how it can contribute to your eye disease or whatever it is.
So when it comes to, mitochondria dealing with sort of the toxins and then maybe becoming so broken that they're giving off these reactive oxygen species at a level more than normal, because we know that they give off a little bit, and I learned in your book that that's not always a bad thing. So we're constantly, we're like treating it with anti-inflammatories, or we're like, but it's not beneficial. So can we talk about that process of how mitochondria, how reactive oxygen species are actually triggers to do certain things, and when things go awry? I know you've used the term rust and soot. I'm assuming you're referring to advanced glycation end products and some of these things that kind of build up in the body. Can you walk us through that?
Every machine, no matter how efficient we're trying to make it, is not perfect. And in the case of the mitochondria electron transport, as some of the electron escape and they create reactive oxygen species and other forms of the free radicals are for other forms of oxidative agents. Those agents are looking for a partner, and so they interact with something else, and then they create something that is a bit more stable. They themselves are unstable. But the body has built the body is amazing. So it's a very amazing machine that tells the cell how much work you've done, because if you monitor how much of those leftover ROS, the active oxygen species, are being made, it tells you how much work you are done. And in fact, as ROS accumulates, eventually it determines that, okay, we are tired enough, it's now time to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so ROS signaling is very important. And there was a fad, let's pump ourselves with antioxidants. Yes, but not all oxidants are created equal, and they are important also. They are a way for the cell to say, I have a viral infection. Come fight the virus with me. The cell said, I can't do it alone. Bring the army, bring the immune cells. So ROS are very important in that fashion. Okay, but then when, as I said, ROS don't like to stand by themselves. They interact with other molecules, and they create molecules that are much more stable, and they are not the natural molecule. So the machinery to get rid of them is not capable of getting rid of them as fast as they would get rid of a non-modified molecule. So amino acid can get oxidized, or DNA can get oxidized. And when it's oxidized like that, the machinery that gets rid of it gets stuck there, takes longer to take it apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the pods are really important. And if you accumulate a lot of those, it's just, there is no catch up, and you start to see aggregation of those proteins that have been modified and or lipids that are damaged and so on. And those are starting to result in disease.
Mm-hmm.
So removing the rust and and the soot is an important function that we do at home all the time, and we need to do with our body as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy. Just sleep.
Yeah.
And just don't overload your system, and exercise, and spend time loving yourself and your environment, and not exposing yourself to toxins. It's not, when you know why it's important, it's not difficult to do it. And if I can say something important, I think for a while in our culture, there was a push for, working 80 hours and, burning the candles at both ends and on and on. It was kind of this bravado. And on the other side, if you don't do that, you're lazy or you're self-serving. No, you're serving your body so that you can serve everything else for longer, better. So I think if we stop feeling guilty about taking the time for that, for making sure that the mitochondria function optimally, then we are doing worse, not only for ourselves, but also for society, for your family, definitely.
I heard a quote that reminds me of what you're saying, that said, everything that's a grind turns to dust. And as someone who was, I'm an entrepreneur, my parents are entrepreneurs. I kind of grew up in that hustle culture. And, being a woman, also trying to prove myself, I feel like you double down on that. And then becoming a mom, it's the struggle of like, well, my heart and soul are with these babies, and I also need to be able to turn it off. And an entrepreneur, you don't clock in and clock out. It's the lights are always on in the business, if you know what I mean. And so I love to hear you say that, because I do feel like what's meant for us will come in time, and we have to really be intentional with slowing down and prioritizing our sleep and our family and connection. Like my sisters and I call it DMCs, deep, meaningful conversations, not the surface stuff, but like really just like get with your people and
I love that.
Have a DMC. So I think, what I feel like I love so much about this podcast is I've had so many experts from so many different walks of life, like business experts, researchers like yourselves, professors, like authors. And when you get down to like the meat and potatoes of what they're telling you to do, it's the stuff your mom or grandma would tell you to do, which is like, just move your body, get some good sleep, like have some love in your life and the people you love around you, laugh, like, and eat the foods you can recognize, like one ingredient foods. It's a chicken, it's beef, it's broccoli, it's lettuce, it's a carrot, it's an apple, it's some berries. Like we don't need all the extra things. And I know I brought up MOTS-C and urolithin A, which we didn't really get to, but that's from pomegranate.
You can eat pomegranate.
Yeah.
If you have the right, which by the way I love, and I eat Mediterranean diet. I love, and also if you have the right bacteria in your gut, then you can make urolithin A. Not everybody has the right bacteria in your gut, so. But I want to say something about balance, because as a mentor, as a professor in the university, I oftentimes get students, male and female, say, "What is it the right time to have children?" Mm-hmm. How do you handle having children and having a career and so on? So So I say two things. First of all, it's always hard. So there is no right time, which means that any time is the right time.
Yeah.
And I would add to that now, having them when you're younger is better because you have more energy for them.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that I truly believe that I wouldn't have been as good at what I do if I didn't have them. And I remember one time I went for a job interview in another university. I was then at UCSF, and there was a job interview at Berkeley where I did my postdoc. I really wanted to go there. It was an awful interview in that during the interview, the people in the department were fighting with each other about what should be done. I mean, it was unpleasant. I came home, I was totally exhausted and also demoralized. And at that time, we had 3 kids. They were all in their pajamas waiting on the stairs. They heard me coming and they gave me a hug. And it's like, I can handle it. This is okay. Somebody think I'm the best thing ever. I really feel like having children and family, even though it's a lot of work and waking at night and worrying about it and getting their food to go to school and clean clothes and on and on and on and on and cleaning their toys.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It is giving you balance. It's giving you a sense of value. And also days when it's hard at work, then it's good at home. It's hard at work. At home, you can go to work, and that's great. Yeah. So, but it's good for your mitochondria. Plus, they have your mitochondria, so you have all the investment to make sure that their mitochondria will be well as well.
Oh, I'd love to end on that. And I just want to, I want you to thank you for saying that, because I remember it was like my 30th birthday. My parents took my husband and I to dinner, and my dad's like, all right, I don't care about your business. When are you having babies? And it was like 5 years later, because I was so worried about where I was and making sure I'd built it big enough to sustain us. And in hindsight, it's like, I would have loved to have like 4 or 5 children. And if I had started just a couple years earlier, I could have. And I couldn't agree with you more. Like, it feels really full. And it does create a balance it's just the meaning. It feels like the meaning, and then also put so much more passion in you to what you're leaving in this world, and like memory of them. Like you're like, my next project is like really to like leave a mark for them and leave the world better than it was before they were here. So I don't know. Yeah, I could talk to you about motherhood and working for hours, but let's wrap up today by talking about how we pass down our mitochondria and why it's important for us to take care of ourselves and our mitochondria.
So first, how do we pass our mitochondria? So mitochondria we get only for our mom, almost 100% only from our moms.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the mitochondria from my mom, her mom, and so on, and my husband only from his mom, and so on. That discovery, which is not that old, it was from around the 80s,
mm-hmm.
was earth-shaking, was very confusing. It means a component of our genetics is not a mixture of the 2 parents, but it's uniquely for just one parent.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all sorts of interesting aspects for that. One of them is that you can trace back by who was Eve. Yeah. And of course, there was a big hubbub about that, whether it was a single Eve and 200,000 years ago. It's clearly not a single Eve, but it means that at that time, the diversity, which we know was sub-Saharan Africa, was extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those establishing mothers, they did not make it. Mm-hmm. They for the changes in the environment and so on. So they at one point, their mitochondria haplotypes, the unique aspect of their mitochondrial DNA, was not suitable for that environment, and so it disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned MOTS-C, this human that was found that is 5,000-year-old human, and we went to see everything about him. It was really fun in northern Italy, and one of the things that we discovered, I thought, I'm Italian, my mom is from Tuscany, maybe we have the same mitochondria, and we found out that his mitochondria, there are no living humans with his mitochondria. So there were many moms, establishing moms, whose mitochondria didn't fit the environment, and eventually, or for some reason, they disappeared. And we know that mitochondria, for somebody that lives in northern countries, allows them to generate heat better, whereas those that in southern countries are allow them to endure longer distance running and so on. And so it explains why we're not the same in many aspects. But just thinking about the fact that you are passing the mitochondria one to the other is really also interesting when you try to think about your health and disease and how changes in the mitochondria are affecting that and so on. So that's the first part of your question.
Correct.
Okay, so the second part of the question was, what can we do? What are the many things that we could do to help our mitochondria? And there are many. First of all, don't beat yourself. So we talked about not stressing and so on. There have many options to help your mitochondria. Studies show that, for example, people who are deprived of sleep have damaged mitochondria. But if they exercise, they can benefit the mitochondria. And there is one postdoc at Stanford in colleagues' lab that sleeps. He cannot sleep much, so he sleeps about 4 hours. But he's before he comes to work, he cycles for God knows how many miles. So perhaps that's how he maintains his mitochondria. Not that it's recommended to switch one with the other, but there are people who are just different. Exercise. We talked about exercise are very good for your mitochondria for a variety of reasons. And we talked about the fact that you need both endurance, but also also strengthening your increasing your muscle body. So weight resistance. They make you more mitochondria, more functional mitochondria. They clean them up. They make you more muscle, so you have more, and so on. We talked about sleep. We talked about proper food. You know much more about that. And proper food also means, balanced food. We talked about not eating at night. This is an easy thing. We didn't talk about restricted versus restricted foods or intermittent fasting and so on. There are lots of things about it. But one thing is clear. It's really a good idea to limit the hours that you're eating. Not to 2 hours. I met a person who does it, but actually during the light hours, that's ideal. And not munching, sugary, terrible things at night, not getting glucose bump when you're switching to fat. Avoiding toxins. We have toxins in our environment. We really need to try to minimize our exposure to that. But also we drink alcohol, and alcohol generate a soot called acetaldehyde. Aldehydes are one of the major soots that we have in our body that are normally formed as you metabolize things, and it's the mitochondria that get rid of those. So it's really important not to overload it. But also pesticides, herbicides, air pollution also, but unfortunately we cannot always control that. So try to minimize it. I think that all those habits are not such a major, and spending time outside, forest raising and so on. There are not such big changes. And if we are aware of what their consequences, the impact of them, spending time with friends, laughing and so on, we recognize, what we've done now, maybe we didn't work for an hour, but it's good for us and we will work better tomorrow or for longer time. We should all aim for health span. I know that there is a lot of conversation about lifespan. I'm not sure. Health span is what we should aim for, but I think health span. And it would be wonderful if there would be a mechanism where we can shorten the time of disease associated with aging, and then there would be a switch.
Yeah.
but something that will be not so debilitating as we see with aging families. So I think, yes, I think there are things that we can do, and it's never late to start doing them. That's another thing that we think, I should have started at 20, now it's too late. So no, it's never too late to start.
I think the fact that we can continually build mitochondria with exercise and protect them with sleep, like right there, you're like, those are two low-hanging fruit that I can get after. And you've made it very clear through the research throughout this book that it's never too late to start. And I feel so motivated to get back to sprinting and running like I was still a soccer player. So I appreciate all of the time and effort it went to put together the Life Machines. This book is amazing. I loved every single minute of it. And many times when preparing for this podcast and getting books sent, I'll listen to them on audio or on high speed and then take notes and then go to the hard copy. I read this page by page and took notes like it was one of my lecture books from back in school. I have drawings, I have all the things. And it was even at my office before I came up to tape this today and drove by to get it just to make sure that I had everything that I wanted to say today. So I really can't thank you enough. It really is truly inspiring. And I know it took a long time for you and your husband to write it, but it was so well worth it. And definitely from reading it last year in 2025 when it came out, one of my top 5 books to read for 2025. So thank you for putting your heart and soul into it.
Well, I'm very grateful for what you were saying, and I'm happy to have had this opportunity to talk on your podcast.
Well, thank you, Dr. Daria, for being here and for all your work. Where can people follow along? Where can they get your book, The Life Machines? How do you want us to keep up with you?
Okay, so you can always find me at Stanford at mochly-rosen.stanford.edu, and my website. I'm on LinkedIn. And the book can be found everywhere, bookstores, Amazon. And the key thing is that I hope that people understand that the role of scientists is to make what we do accessible to the public. And if I manage to do it with my husband, this is a very rewarding activity. So
you did. Kudos to you both. Thank you for being here. What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Be Well by Kelly LeVeque podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review in your favorite podcast app and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. We're also excited to share that full-length video episodes are now on YouTube and Spotify, so you can watch along as you listen. The best way to support me and the show is by sharing it with your friends and family. Your recommendations make all the difference. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson. The video is recorded by Luke Rodriguez and edited by Jesse Trout. See you next time.
The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical or mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or healthcare team first.